Right now, somewhere inside your skull, your brain is guessing. It is guessing the weight of the blanket on your legs. It is guessing the color of the light behind your eyelids. It is guessing that the room around you is still there, still solid, still waiting. And here is the strange part. If it guessed wrong and built a convincing dream of this exact moment instead, you would have no reliable way to tell the difference. Neuroscientists have noticed something uncomfortable. The same regions that construct our waking world also construct our dreams. The machinery does not switch off at night. It simply changes what it listens to. In deep dreaming, the brain can generate a bedroom so detailed, so textured, so emotionally real, that the dreamer insists afterward they were awake. So welcome. Settle in. Let your shoulders drop. If these slow, drifting explorations bring you some quiet at night, you are welcome to stay a while. And subscribe if it feels right. Only if it feels right. What follows is not an argument. It is a long, gentle walk through one question that has haunted thinkers, mystics, and modern scientists alike. What if reality, the one you are lying inside of at this very moment, is closer to a dream than we normally allow ourselves to imagine? And what if something, very slowly, is beginning to wake up? We will not rush toward answers. We will drift softly toward the edges of knowing. Lie still for a moment. Notice how the world seems to arrive at you. Sound, light, the soft pressure of the bed beneath your body. It feels direct, immediate, as if your senses were open windows, and reality simply flowed through them, untouched. But the truth is stranger and far more beautiful. Your brain, tucked inside the dark, silent cave of your skull, has never actually seen the world. It has never heard a single sound. It sits in total darkness, receiving faint electrical signals through long, thin nerves, and from those tiny pulses it paints everything. The warmth of a lamp, the face of someone you love, the color of the sky at dusk, all of it assembled, all of it rendered from within. Scientists call this predictive processing. The idea is remarkably simple once you let it settle. Your brain does not wait patiently for information. It guesses what is about to happen, builds a rough model, and then uses your senses only to correct the guess. What you experience as reality is less a photograph and more a constantly updated prediction, a hypothesis your brain is testing against the world, moment by moment, which means the room you are lying in right now is, in a very real sense, painted from the inside. A careful, educated guess, dressed up as certainty. Here is where it begins to tilt. If perception is built rather than received, then the line between waking and dreaming becomes less like a wall and more like a shade of color. In a dream, the same machinery runs, the same construction, the same painting. The only difference is that the brain is relying on its own internal signals, without the quiet corrections of the outside world. Some researchers have begun to describe ordinary waking life using a phrase that, once you hear it, is hard to unhear. They call it a controlled hallucination. Not hallucination in the frightening sense, simply a world imagined by the brain, gently anchored by incoming information, a dream kept on a leash by reality. Consider how this feels when you think about color. Out there in the universe there is no red, there is no blue, there are only wavelengths of light, silent and invisible in themselves. The richness of color you see is invented inside you, a kind of inner music your brain composes so you can navigate the world more easily. The sky is not truly blue, you are, and yet the sky looks blue. Undeniably, beautifully. That is the quiet magic of the waking mind. It does not lie to you. It simply offers you a workable painting, refined over millions of years, so accurate for survival that you almost never notice it is a painting at all. Now imagine the softest question. If your brain can build such a convincing world from faint electrical whispers, how different really is waking from dreaming? Perhaps not opposites, perhaps two versions of the same act. One, a painting with the curtains open, the other, a painting with the curtains drawn, and somewhere between those two states, a suspicion begins, gently, without alarm, that what we call reality might be the most elaborate, most disciplined dream the mind has ever learned to have, there is a small, quiet secret hidden inside every moment of your experience. A secret so subtle that most people live their entire lives without noticing it. It is the tiny delay between what happens and when you know that it happened. When light hits your eye, it does not become sight instantly. It travels through layers of cells, sparks a cascade of chemical reactions, then races through the optic nerve toward the back of your brain, where it is processed, interpreted, and finally presented to awareness. All of this takes time, not much, perhaps a tenth of a second, sometimes more, sometimes less, but it is real time, real delay, which means, in the most literal sense, you are always living a fraction of a second in the past. Let that rest gently for a moment. The world you see right now is not the world as it is. It is the world as it was a blink ago. A soft, personal echo of reality, always arriving late, and yet life does not feel delayed. It feels seamless, immediate, as if each instant were happening exactly when it happens. This is where the brain performs one of its quietest miracles. It edits, it backdates, it weaves the pieces of perception together so skillfully that the seams vanish. Scientists who study the timing of consciousness have found that the brain will actually wait briefly before stitching different senses together. Sound, sight, and touch all travel at different speeds, arrive at different times, and are processed in different regions. Without editing, the world would feel like a badly dubbed film, so the brain smooths it, adjusts it, presents it to you as one continuous flow, even though behind the curtain it is assembled from fragments. Some researchers describe this as the brain constructing a narrative of now, a story of the present moment, told so fluently that you mistake it for the present moment itself. And here is where the thought begins to tilt towards something dreamlike. When you dream at night, your mind does something very similar. It stitches disconnected images into a flowing experience. It fills in gaps. It invents reasons for strange transitions, so that even the most impossible dream feels, in the moment, logical. You are rarely surprised inside a dream, even when the scenery changes without warning. The mind has already written the bridge between one scene and the next. Waking perception may not be so different. It too is a carefully edited story, a continuous narrative built from fragments, delays, and guesses. The main distinction is how tightly it is tied to the outside world, and so a gentle question drifts in. If the brain is willing to quietly rewrite time itself, blending past and present into a seamless now, what else might it be smoothing over? What else might be edited, without our knowledge, so that the dream of waking can feel as stable as it does? There is no need to feel unsettled by this. It is, if anything, a kind of tenderness. Your brain works tirelessly, in the dark, to make your experience feel whole. It hides its own effort, so that life can simply feel like life. A generous illusion, offered with care. Somewhere in the world, right now, a person is dreaming. And inside that dream, they are certain they are awake. They might be walking through a street they know, speaking to a friend, noticing the details, the cracks in the pavement, the breeze against their skin, the taste of coffee. Everything feels ordinary. Everything feels real. And when they wake, sometimes only minutes later, they will carry that strange impression with them. How vivid it was. How nothing in it seemed off. How, until the very end, there was no reason to doubt. This is one of the most quietly remarkable facts about the sleeping mind. It can build experiences so convincing that, from the inside, they are indistinguishable from waking life. In the last few decades, researchers have studied a particular kind of dreamer, the lucid dreamer. These are people who, somewhere within their dreams, notice. They realize gently that they are dreaming, yet remain inside the experience. What makes them scientifically interesting is that they can communicate with the outside world using small, pre-agreed eye movements. Their bodies are asleep, paralyzed, still, but their eyes under closed lids can send signals. In this way, researchers have been able to ask questions of dreamers while they are still dreaming, and the answers have been strange and illuminating. Dreamers can count. They can solve simple problems. They can estimate the passage of time with surprising accuracy. Their brains, measured through sensitive recordings, light up in patterns remarkably similar to waking cognition. In many ways, a lucid dream is not a lesser version of consciousness. It is a full one, simply pointed inward, which leads to a thought that, once noticed, is difficult to put down. If the dreaming brain can think, reason, feel, and perceive with the depth and clarity of a waking mind, then whatever consciousness is, it does not require the outside world to unfold. It can run fully in a closed room on its own power, without external reference. Some philosophers have quietly asked what this might mean. If a dream can be as rich as waking, is there any guaranteed test to know which one you are in right now? You might look around and say, of course I am awake. The details are too clear, too stable. But lucid dreamers often say the same thing in the middle of a dream with complete confidence. There are small tricks people use, trying to read text twice to see if it changes, looking at their hands to see if the fingers seem stable. These are not perfect tests, but they speak to something deeper. The fact that we even need tricks to tell dreaming from waking is itself a revelation. And yet, there is no need to feel uneasy. The point is not that waking life is false. The point is that the mind is capable of far more than we usually give it credit for. The same quiet machinery that paints your bedroom each morning can paint entire worlds each night. Worlds that feel, from the inside, no less real. Perhaps the boundary between dreaming and waking was never a wall. Perhaps it was always more like a horizon, a place where two landscapes meet and gently, almost imperceptibly, exchange their light. There is a peculiar experience, reported by people across every culture and every century, that sits at the exact hinge between sleeping and waking. It has been called many names, but its shape is always similar. A person opens their eyes. They are in their bed. The room looks exactly as it should. The clock reads a believable hour. They stand, stretch, perhaps begin their morning, and then, sometime later, they realize something has gone wrong. They are still dreaming. This is a false awakening, a dream of waking up, so convincing that the dreamer is entirely fooled. Some people experience these only rarely. Others have them in long nested layers, waking only to wake again, only to wake again, until the idea of waking begins to feel slippery. Through it all, each layer seems solid, each bedroom seems real, each morning seems ordinary. Researchers studying sleep have noted that the brain during these episodes does not produce a dream that announces itself. It produces the most mundane dream possible, a copy of the familiar, the furniture in the right place, the light falling correctly, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the next room, which raises a gentle, almost weightless question. If the brain can reproduce the feeling of ordinary waking so faithfully that even you cannot tell, what exactly is it that makes any given morning feel real? Is it the evidence of the senses? The dreamer has those. Is it the continuity of thought? The dreamer has that too. Is it a sense of certainty? The dreamer is often more certain than the waking person. Closely related to this is sleep paralysis, where the body remains asleep, but a kind of awareness flickers back. The sleeper seems to be in their own room, unable to move, sometimes sensing presences that are not there, or hearing sounds that cannot be traced. Neuroscientists describe this as a mixed state, the dreaming brain partly active, the waking brain partly arriving, the body still held in its nightly stillness. It is, in a sense, a glimpse of the machinery with the covers pulled back. What these experiences quietly suggest is that our trust in waking reality is not based on any secret sense. It is a habit, a deeply practiced, beautifully rehearsed habit of assuming that the room is the room, the morning is the morning, the world is the world. Most of the time that habit is correct, but the fact that it can be fooled, not just a little, but completely, is worth sitting with. Some philosophers have argued that this is not a problem. It is a teaching. If waking feels no different from a dream of waking, perhaps the question we ask is slightly wrong. Perhaps instead of asking, "Am I awake?" we could ask something softer. What is the quality of my awareness right now? How present am I within whatever this is? Because here is the curious thing. A false awakening is only false because eventually you wake more deeply. There is always a further waking available, always another layer of clarity, which hints at something that has quietly threaded through mystic traditions for centuries, that what we call being awake might itself be a kind of sleep, waiting patiently for a deeper opening. Long before brain scans, long before the word neuroscience existed, long before anyone could measure a single electrical whisper inside a sleeping skull, human beings were already noticing something strange about reality, something that refused to sit still, something that, when you looked at it closely enough, began to tremble. In ancient China, a philosopher named Zhuangzi wrote down a small story that has traveled across more than 2,000 years without losing its strangeness. He dreamed he was a butterfly, drifting between flowers, entirely a butterfly, with no memory of being a man. Then he woke, and as he sat there, in his human body, a question settled over him that he could not easily answer. Was he a man who had dreamed of being a butterfly, or was he, at this very moment, a butterfly, dreaming of being a man? What makes this old story remarkable is not its poetry, it is its precision. Zhuangzi is not being playful. He is pointing at the exact problem modern researchers now describe in the language of predictive brains and lucid dreams. From the inside of any conscious state, there is no certain way to measure what contains it. Every experience comes dressed in the same cloth of certainty. The butterfly is sure it is flying. The man is sure he is sitting. Both cannot easily prove themselves right. On the other side of the ancient world, in the quiet forests of the Indian subcontinent, thinkers were describing something they called Maya. The word is often translated as illusion, but that translation can be misleading. Maya is not a lie. It is more like a veil, a delicate, shimmering layer draped over something deeper. The world we experience is real in its way, but it is also a kind of appearance, a surface woven over a more fundamental reality that is difficult to name. Within this view, ordinary life is not rejected. It is simply understood to be partial, a story being told gently inside a vaster silence. And in Greece, centuries before clocks or cameras, Plato imagined a cave, people chained since birth, facing a wall, unable to turn their heads. Behind them, a fire. Between the fire and the wall, moving shapes. The shadows on the wall are all they have ever seen. To them, those shadows are reality. They argue about the shadows. They name them. They fear them. And yet, if one of them were freed, turned around, and led out of the cave into the sunlight, they would not simply see the truth. They would at first be blinded. These images, from 3 continents, 3 traditions, 3 ways of thinking, echo one another with a strange consistency. Each suggests that what we perceive is not the whole. Each suggests that there is something behind the surface, and each proposes gently that waking up is less an event than a process, a slow turning, a gradual softening, an accommodation to a deeper light. Modern science, in its own language, has arrived at a curiously similar suspicion. That perception is constructed, that the brain paints the world, that the self who watches is itself part of the painting. Old intuitions, once dismissed as mystical, now shimmer in laboratories, worded differently, but pointing somewhere similar. Across time, across cultures, the same whisper seems to drift forward. The dream and the dreamer may be closer than they seem. There is a place every night that almost no one remembers visiting. It is not quite sleep, it is not quite wakefulness, it is the strange soft country between them, a few minutes, usually unnoticed, where the mind begins to loosen its grip on the day and has not yet fully entered the dream. Those who have studied it have given it a name that sounds almost like a breath: hypnagogia. If you have ever lain in bed, eyes closed, and begun to see faint shapes drifting across the darkness, you have been there. If you have ever heard a single word spoken clearly just as you were falling asleep, a word that seemed to come from somewhere else, you have been there. If you have ever noticed your thoughts turning slowly from sentences into images, from logic into feeling, from ideas into small strange scenes, you have been there. Hypnagogia is not a dream. It is the doorway where thinking begins to dissolve. The inner narrator, who spends all day telling you the story of your life, begins to lose its voice. Images arise without permission. Small scenes assemble and unravel on their own. Time briefly loses its shape. Scientists who have looked at this transition find that it is not a simple switch. The brain does not flip from awake to asleep. It shifts through layers, gradually, like a hand letting go of a rope, one finger at a time. Certain regions quiet down while others grow more active. The parts that enforce logic become softer. The parts that generate imagery become freer. And somewhere in that slow release, the mind begins to create small drifting fragments of dream, not yet stories, just pieces. Historically, some of the most creative minds are said to have lived in this threshold. Poets returning from it with strange lines, inventors catching the shape of a solution just as it melted, mathematicians glimpsing a connection that refused to appear when they were fully awake. The seam between states seems to be a place where the mind is unusually open, as if the normal filters are thinning, and something deeper, quieter, is free to surface, which invites a question, weightless and slow. If hypnagogia is the space where waking begins to dissolve into dream, then perhaps waking itself is simply a denser, more organized version of that same softness, a thicker layer of the same fabric. Think of it this way. When you are wide awake, your brain is pulling very strongly on the outside world, using every sensory thread to keep its painting anchored. When you drift towards sleep, those threads begin to loosen. The painting starts to move on its own. Eventually, it paints freely, and we call that a dream. What we call being awake might be the tightest version of this painting. What we call hypnagogia might be the painting starting to breathe, and if that is so, then awakening, in the deeper sense hinted at by so many traditions, may not be about escaping the painting. It may be about learning to feel the paint, to notice softly that all of experience is being composed, right now, moment by moment, by something vast and gentle and not entirely separate from you. The seam between states is never fully closed. It is only ever forgotten. And tonight, as you lie here, it may be closer than you realize. There is a story that quietly unsettled the 20th century, and it begins with something no larger than a speck of light. For a long time, the world seemed to make sense. Objects had positions, objects had speeds. If you knew enough, you could, in principle, know everything. The universe was imagined as a great machine, grinding steadily forward, its parts clear and measurable. Then physicists began to look more closely, deeper than atoms, past the familiar rules, and what they found there did not behave like anything in the world above. A particle, when no one was watching, did not have a single location. It existed as a kind of possibility, a soft, spread-out cloud of maybe here, maybe there. Only when it was observed, only when some kind of measurement reached toward it, did it settle into one definite place. Before that, it seemed to exist in many places at once, in a state that cannot be easily pictured because nothing in our ordinary world does this. This is what physicists sometimes call the observer effect, though the name is often misunderstood. It does not mean that conscious attention magically shapes reality. It means that, at the smallest scales, asking a question of the universe changes the answer. The act of looking is, itself, a nudge, and until you nudge, the particle is content to remain in a shimmer of possibilities. If that does not feel a little strange, it may help to sit with it for a moment. In ordinary life, things are where they are, whether or not anyone is noticing. The cup on the table does not vanish when you leave the room. The stars do not blink out when no telescope is pointed at them. Reality feels stable, independent, stubbornly there. But at the deepest levels anyone has measured, reality does not behave like that. It behaves like something waiting, something that has not fully decided what to be until it is asked. Something that, in a very strange way, responds. Here is where a quiet echo begins to rise. In dreams, the details of a place often have the same quality. A room in a dream is clear where you look and blurry where you do not. A page may have writing on it until you try to read it twice, and then the letters shift. The dream does not bother rendering what is not being attended to. It saves its attention for what you are noticing. Some thinkers cautiously have pointed to this resemblance, not as proof, not as certainty, just as a softly persistent similarity. The smallest ingredients of the universe behave in certain ways, like the details of a dream, undecided until considered, possibilities until observed. Physicists have spent a century debating what this means, and they are still debating. Some say reality is simply stranger than common sense allows, and there is no need to compare it to anything mental. Others wonder whether information, or even awareness, is woven into the fabric at a level we do not yet understand. No one has answered this. No one may for a long time. But the suspicion lingers that the universe at its root is not made of solid things waiting quietly, that it is, instead, made of something more like a question, patient, open, and somehow gently listening. Pause for a moment and picture the world not as objects, but as news, not as furniture, but as messages, not as things, but as the shapes of what is being told. This is not a poetic trick. It is, increasingly, a direction that serious physicists have taken the question of reality. Some of them have begun to suggest, very carefully, that at the deepest level, the universe may not be made of matter at all. It may be made of information. The idea has roots older than it seems. Decades ago, a thoughtful physicist named John Archibald Wheeler summed it up with a phrase that has quietly echoed through modern science. He called it from bit. The suggestion was gentle but radical. Every it, every particle, every force, every object you could point at might arise, ultimately, from a bit, a yes or no answer to some deep underlying question. Imagine the universe as a vast, silent conversation. At every point in space, at every instant of time, something is being asked, and something is being answered. The accumulated answers are what we call reality. The stones, the rivers, your own body, all of it, in this view, might be the visible shape of an enormous flow of information. This framework is sometimes called digital physics, though the word digital can mislead. It does not mean the universe is a computer in the sense of a laptop or a phone. It means, more carefully, that at the bottom of everything there may be a structure resembling computation, simple underlying rules generating extraordinary complexity, much like how a handful of instructions can produce unfolding patterns in mathematics. This is, of course, only one possibility. There are other serious ideas. Some physicists still believe matter and fields are fundamental, and information is just a useful way of describing them. Others think that space itself, or even time, might emerge from deeper informational layers we cannot yet see. These are not settled questions. They are open, living debates. Framing them as possibilities rather than answers is essential, and yet the resonance with the theme is hard to ignore. If reality is, in some sense, made of information, then the distance between waking life and a dream becomes curiously smaller. A dream, after all, is made of information. It is a pattern inside the brain carrying meaning, generating experience. It has no external matter. It has only structure. And if the universe itself has a similar deep structure, patterns generating experience, then the difference between the two is not a difference of material. It is a difference of scale and context. There is also something quietly humbling in this thought. For most of human history, we believed the world was made of earth, water, air, and fire. Then we believed it was made of atoms. Then we believed it was made of particles and fields. Each time, reality turned out to be something lighter, stranger, less solid than the previous picture. Information may be the softest layer yet. None of this claims that the universe has no origin, or that it made itself. These are different questions entirely, questions about how, not why. What this gentle model says is simpler, that whatever the deepest layer is, it might be far more like a pattern of meaning than a heap of stuff. A universe where existence itself is, perhaps, a slowly unfolding message. There is a kind of image that is strange the first time you encounter it. A flat piece of film, no thicker than paper, somehow carrying a full three-dimensional scene. When light touches it correctly, depth appears where there is no depth, a whole room, captured on a surface that has no room inside it. This is a hologram, and for decades it has been a curiosity of laboratories and museum gift shops. But in the late 20th century, a handful of physicists began to wonder whether the universe itself might operate on a similar principle, not as a gimmick, but as a serious mathematical possibility. The idea emerged from, of all places, the study of black holes. When physicists tried to calculate how much information could fit inside a black hole, they expected the answer to depend on its volume, on how much space was inside it. Instead, they found something unexpected. The maximum information a black hole could hold seemed to depend on the area of its surface, not its volume, as if everything inside was somehow encoded on the boundary. From this strange result, a broader proposal began to take shape, gently, cautiously. It is called the holographic principle. The suggestion is that our three-dimensional reality, with its depth, its distance, its apparent solidity, might, at some deep level, be a kind of projection. The information describing it might live on a faraway surface, a lower dimensional boundary, while we experience it as a full dimensional world. If this feels dizzying, that is understandable. It is meant to. Even many physicists who work with these ideas say they do not quite know what it would mean for reality to be holographic in this deep sense. It is a mathematical hint, a tantalizing consistency, not a proof, but if one allows the thought, only for a moment, the image is remarkable. Imagine that the world you see around you, its mountains, its oceans, its wide skies, is like the image produced by a hologram, real in every way that matters to your experience, coherent, stable, beautiful, and yet its description, its true storage, lives somewhere far subtler than the space you seem to move through. This does not mean the world is fake. It does not mean you are not here. A hologram is not an illusion in the dismissive sense. It is a genuine pattern of light, carrying a genuine scene, simply not stored in the way you might first expect. And this is where the suspicion sharpens, softly. In a dream, the full richness of an imagined world is produced without any extra space. It is all encoded in the folds of the brain, a relatively small organ holding seemingly vast landscapes. If the universe shares this kind of compression, where a small boundary can encode a large world, then dreaming and waking begin to look, at least in their information structure, like distant cousins. Of course, none of this claims to explain ultimate origins. It does not say where the information comes from, or what sustains it. Those questions remain open, and likely will for a very long time. What the holographic picture offers is something gentler, a hint that solidity is not quite what it seems, that the world at its deepest layers may be painted on something we cannot yet see, and that the painting is, in its own quiet way, remarkable. There is a question that has become surprisingly popular in recent decades, and yet, when asked softly, it still has the power to tilt the room. The question is this: how would you know, really know, if the reality around you was some kind of simulation? This is not the question of a single film or novel. It is a question that has been taken seriously by philosophers and a few thoughtful scientists, most notably in an argument put forward by a thinker named Nick Bostrom. His reasoning was careful and worth understanding in its simplest form. He suggested that if any advanced civilization anywhere in the universe ever became capable of running extremely detailed simulations of conscious beings, and if they ever chose to run many such simulations, then the number of simulated experiences could vastly outnumber the number of original ones. In that case, purely by numbers, any given conscious experience would be more likely to be simulated than original. It is important to hold this lightly. This is not a claim. It is a thought experiment, a way of tracing the logic to see where it leads. Many respected thinkers disagree with its assumptions, others find it compelling. Neither side can prove the matter, but the point of a good thought experiment is not to prove, it is to loosen, to soften the certainties we did not realize we were holding, and here the softening comes in waves. Consider for a moment that even if we set aside the word simulation, the deeper question remains: What is it exactly that distinguishes a reality from something profoundly dreamlike? If the world is made of information, as some models propose, if perception is constructed, as neuroscience increasingly suggests, if the smallest parts of the universe behave only when asked, as quantum experiments reveal, then the label we use matters less than the texture we discover. Whether we call it a simulation, a projection, a dream, or a creation, what we keep finding under every microscope and every telescope is that the world is stranger, lighter, and more participatory than the old picture of solid stuff allowed. And here is where a gentle boundary should be drawn. Even the boldest thought experiment cannot answer the deepest questions. It cannot tell us why there is anything at all. It cannot tell us where the underlying order or the first flicker of existence originated. These remain entirely open. Some find meaning in mystery, some find meaning in faith, some find meaning in patient inquiry. The simulation idea, at most, reframes how, not why. What is interesting for our slow journey is this. The mere fact that the hypothesis cannot be easily dismissed tells us something about the nature of our knowledge. From the inside of any conscious experience, there is no perfectly reliable test for what ultimately contains it. The dreamer cannot be sure they are waking. The waker cannot be sure they are not, in some deeper sense, still dreaming. The logical doors, once opened, do not close neatly. Perhaps the most useful thing this line of thinking offers is not an answer, but an attitude, a willingness to hold reality with lighter hands, to feel the mystery of being here without needing to resolve it tonight, to notice, with calm curiosity, that the question itself, are we inside something, is one of the oldest and most human wonders of all. There is something strange about the universe that has quietly bothered physicists for the better part of a century. It is not a grand secret, written in hidden equations. It is a pattern that sits on the surface of their work, patient and persistent. The universe appears to be delicately calibrated. The numbers that describe how nature operates, the strength of gravity, the pull between particles, the rate at which matter forms stars, the precise balance between expansion and contraction in the early moments of space and time, all sit within remarkably narrow ranges. Nudge any of them by a small amount, and the universe we know becomes impossible. Stars would not form, atoms would not hold together, complexity and certainly life would not arise. This observation is sometimes called fine-tuning, and it is not a fringe idea. Serious scientists across many specialties have noticed it. The question is what it means. There are, broadly, a few ways of thinking about it, and all of them remain live possibilities. One idea is that our universe is simply one of many. Perhaps there is a vast ensemble, sometimes called the multiverse, where different regions or different cosmoses have different values of these constants. In most, nothing interesting happens. In a few, the numbers line up, and conscious beings eventually emerge to ask why the numbers are so convenient. This is called the anthropic view. It does not remove the wonder of our particular existence, but it attempts to frame it within a larger statistical picture. Another approach suggests that there may be deeper laws, not yet discovered, which constrain the constants to their current values. In this view, the apparent fine-tuning is a sign that we have not yet reached the fundamental layer. Behind what looks like delicate balance, there may be a hidden necessity we have not yet seen, and still others hold that the fine-tuning points towards something beyond the reach of science altogether, an underlying order or intentionality, or creative source that physics describes but does not explain. This view has long roots in human thought, and for many it remains deeply meaningful. What is important to say clearly is that none of these interpretations has been proven. They are not scientific rivals in a neat contest. They are different frames, operating at different levels, often answering different questions. Some speak to the how, others speak to the why, and it is possible, even likely, that our current tools can only touch some of them. What the fine-tuning puzzle does offer, without controversy, is a sense of quiet astonishment. Whatever its explanation, the fact that the cosmos sits so precisely on the edge of complexity, where atoms can form, stars can shine, planets can cool, minds can emerge, is not something to pass over lightly. It is one of the most humbling facts in modern science, and in the context of our slow drift through the idea of reality as something dreamlike, it adds a further gentle note. If the universe is a kind of unfolding composition, then the composition is extraordinary. Its notes are not random. Its rhythm allows for eyes, for memory, for wonder itself. Whatever reality is, it has permitted you to ask questions about it. That alone, some have suggested, is a kind of signature, not a proof of any particular answer, but a whisper, quietly, that the dream is not careless. There is a quiet admission that physicists sometimes share, usually late in a conversation, when the formal language has softened and the real feeling underneath comes forward. It is the admission that, the deeper they have looked, the less solid everything has become. In the beginning there was matter, firm, reliable, touchable. Then matter became atoms. Then atoms became mostly empty space, with a few tiny cores and a hum of electrons. Then those cores became collections of even smaller particles. Then those particles became excitations in invisible fields that fill the vacuum. Then those fields became suggestions of something deeper, something still unnamed. Each layer, in turn, took away a little more of the solidity we began with. A chair, under sufficiently powerful inspection, is not a chair. It is atoms, mostly empty. It is fields, rippling. It is perhaps patterns within patterns, depending on which theory you follow. Yet you can sit on it. It holds you. The chair remains in every way that matters to daily life. Nothing has been taken from it, only added to it. This is one of the most counterintuitive gifts of modern science. It does not make the world less real. It makes the world more layered. What looked like a single truth reveals itself to be many overlapping truths, each one correct in its own way, each one incomplete in its own way. And at the very deepest levels, something curious happens. The map begins to dissolve. Physicists describing the smallest scales must use probabilities, not certainties. They describe tendencies, not positions. They speak in possibilities that shimmer rather than in facts that hold still. The universe, when approached carefully enough, refuses to behave like a simple thing. It behaves more and more like a description in search of itself. Some have wondered whether this is a limit of our tools. Others wonder whether it is a limit of our language. And still others quietly suggest that perhaps it is neither, that perhaps reality at its root simply is not the kind of thing that can be fully captured by any map. The territory may always exceed the description. Always. If you sit with this idea softly, something interesting settles. It is not a feeling of loss. It is not a sense that the world has been taken away. It is more like a kind of spaciousness, a recognition that what you are embedded in is larger than any picture you can hold of it. That reality is not less real for being unfinished in our understanding. It is more real, in a way, because it is alive, still revealing itself, still unfolding its own description. And here gently the theme of our slow journey returns. A dream, too, is a description unfolding itself. A dream, too, resists being mapped while you're inside it. A dream, too, is only ever fully known, if ever, from a place beyond it. Perhaps the universe is the same. Perhaps what we call physics is not the dream itself, but the dream's quiet attempt to articulate its own contents. A language the dream has learned to speak, slowly, through beings like us. And perhaps when every map finally dissolves, what remains is not emptiness at all. What remains is simply the thing itself, reality, present, unexplained. Still, in a way we are only beginning to feel, mysteriously, kindly, aware. Something has been quietly following us through every thought of this journey. Something so close, so constant, that it is almost impossible to notice directly. The watcher, the one who seems to sit just behind your eyes, listening to these words. The one you call I. Try for a moment to locate it. Not the body, not the thoughts, the thing that seems to be having them. Where is it? Is it in your head? Is it behind your forehead? Is it in your chest? Most people, when they really look, find that the watcher has no clear address. It seems to hover somewhere, without a precise location. It feels undeniable you are right here reading, noticing, present, and yet, when questioned directly, it tends to slip back like a reflection in water that disappears whenever you reach for it. Neuroscientists studying the brain while people rest or daydream have found something quietly important. There is a network of regions spread across the brain, not housed in any single spot, that becomes active when you are not focused on any specific task. It becomes active when you think about yourself, remember your past, imagine your future, or construct the familiar sense of being a person with a story. Researchers call it the default mode network. It is, in a very real sense, the machinery of self-narration. When this network quiets down, in deep meditation, in certain moments of flow, in some altered states, people often report something strange. The sense of being a separate self softens, the watcher thins, experience continues, but it is no longer arranged around a central point called me. Perception, feeling, awareness, all still happen, but the one who was having them seems to step back. This finding, over many years and many studies, points to something that mystical traditions have whispered for thousands of years, that the self, the fixed inner witness we take for granted, may not be a thing at all. It may be a process, a pattern, a habit of the brain, constructing a center from a swirl of activity, much like a whirlpool constructs itself from flowing water, appearing stable while never actually being still. If that is so, then the watcher you have always assumed to be the real you is, in some sense, a story the brain tells, not a lie, not a trick, a story. A beautifully coherent, remarkably persistent story, built from memories, sensations, language, and the endless murmur of inner speech. Notice how this shifts the question. If the dreamer is itself a construction, then who exactly is doing the waking? Is there a more fundamental awareness beneath the story that simply uses the self as a character to move through the dream of reality? Or is awareness itself a deeper kind of pattern, one we do not yet have the right words for? None of these questions have final answers. Many of them have been asked by thoughtful minds for a very long time. What is quietly comforting, however, is this: even without resolving them, you can notice something softer. The sense of being you is remarkably flexible. It loosens when you are tired, dissolves slightly when you fall asleep, and transforms gently when the mind rests. Which means, in a very personal way, the first layer of reality already beginning to shimmer, already beginning to reveal its painted quality, is not out there. It is right here, the one who is watching. There is a belief most of us carry so quietly that we do not even recognize it as a belief. It is the belief that memory is a kind of recording, that when we recall something from our past, we are playing it back, more or less faithfully, like a film stored somewhere inside us. This belief feels natural. It feels obvious. It is also, as far as modern research can tell, not quite true. Over the past few decades, researchers studying how memory actually works in the brain have uncovered something subtle and remarkable. Each time you remember something, you are not replaying it. You are rebuilding it. The recollection is not pulled from a drawer, fully formed. It is assembled in the moment from scattered traces spread across many regions of the brain. And each time it is assembled, it is also quietly rewritten. The technical term is memory reconsolidation. The gentle meaning is this: every time you recall a memory, the act of recalling it nudges it, reshapes it slightly, and stores it again, slightly changed. Over years, across countless rememberings, a personal history can drift gently from whatever actually happened, like a river slowly carving a new path. This is not a flaw. It may, in fact, be one of the brain's kindest features. It allows memory to adapt, to integrate new understanding, to soften old wounds, to keep the story of a life workable and usable. But it means that the memory of your 10th birthday, or your first kiss, or the voice of someone you loved long ago, is not a preserved fact. It is a living reconstruction, a dream in a sense, rehearsed again and again, each telling slightly different from the last. Sleep is deeply involved in this. When you dream at night, your brain is not idly playing. It is actively processing the day's experiences, replaying fragments, threading them together with older memories, adjusting the web that holds your sense of who you are. Researchers studying what happens during sleep have seen that certain memories are strengthened, others are pruned, and emotional intensity is, in many cases, softened. In the morning, something small has always changed. You are a slightly different person, carrying a slightly different past, which means quietly that your personal history is not a fixed archive. It is more like an unfinished story still being written by a writer you rarely see at work. This connects to our larger journey in a tender way. If your sense of being you is partly a story told by the brain, and the story is constantly being edited by a process you do not consciously control, then the line between waking memory and dreaming begins to blur again. Both are constructed. Both are assembled each time they appear. Both are, in a very real sense, the brain making meaning out of raw material. There is something calming in this idea, if you let it in slowly. It suggests that the past is not a heavy weight to carry. It is a living thing, soft at the edges, still shifting gently with each night of sleep. What hurt you once may not be the same hurt by morning. What you hold as an unchangeable truth about yourself may be softer than you imagine. In this light, sleep is not the opposite of life. It is life's quiet editor, the mind, each night, tending to the story of you, trimming, smoothing, making the dream of your life just slightly more bearable, slightly more beautiful, slightly more yours. There is one ingredient of our lives so deeply woven into experience that we almost never examine it. We feel it flowing, we feel it hurrying, we feel it crawling. Sometimes we feel it vanishing entirely. It is time. We tend to treat time as a kind of uniform river, moving steadily, the same for everyone. But this idea, sturdy as it feels, begins to tremble the closer you look. Consider what happens inside a dream, a long, detailed dream, a whole afternoon spent in another country, a rich conversation with someone you have not seen in years, can unfold inside a few minutes of sleep. The mind compresses and stretches time with astonishing ease. Hours in the dream pass in fragments on the clock. Sometimes whole days feel crossed, while the sleeper barely turns on the pillow. Researchers studying sleep have found that the brain during dreaming does, in fact, compress certain experiences, though perhaps not as dramatically as some reports suggest. What is clear is that subjective time, the time you feel, is far more flexible than the time a clock measures. The felt duration of an experience is constructed the same way color and sound and memory are constructed. Even in ordinary waking life, this flexibility is familiar. An afternoon of joy seems to evaporate. A few minutes of fear seem to last forever. Boredom drags, flow races. The same 60 seconds can feel entirely different depending on what the mind is doing with it. Now pair this with something physicists have shown. In the theory of relativity, time itself is not absolute. It bends with speed. It stretches near large masses. Two clocks, placed in different conditions, can genuinely disagree on how much time has passed. At the level of the universe, time does not flow the same way for every observer. It is, in a real sense, a local thing, a fabric that ripples. So on one hand, inside the mind, time is malleable, shaped by attention and emotion. On the other hand, inside the universe, time is also malleable, shaped by motion and gravity. Neither offers us the steady universal river we often imagine, which raises a soft question. If time is flexible in both the inner world and the outer world, what exactly is it that we are calling time in the first place? Some thinkers have suggested that time, as we feel it, is a kind of interface, a user-friendly illusion, helpful for navigating life, but not fundamental. Underneath, there may be something else, patterns of relationships, changes of state, arrangements that we experience as flow but which are not, deep down, actually flowing. This is not a new idea. Contemplative traditions have long suggested that the sense of time passing is an effect of the mind, and that in certain states, deep meditation, moments of awe, periods of profound presence, time can seem to dissolve entirely, not speed up. not slow down, just lift. If this is so, then one of the most basic textures of waking life, the feeling that time is moving, may itself be a kind of soft invention. Another brushstroke in the painting, another piece of the dream, and here, for a quiet moment, the thought becomes almost tender. If time is a construction, then perhaps now, this very moment, is closer to eternity than you usually let yourself feel. The breath you are taking is not a tick on a clock. It is a small, unhurried glimpse of something that does not need clocks at all. There is something you probably believe about yourself, so obviously that you have never thought to question it. You believe that you end at your skin, that the body you live inside has a clear edge, and that everything within that edge is you, and everything outside of it is not. It is a reasonable assumption. It is also, under closer inspection, softer than it first appears. Consider a small experiment that has been performed in psychology labs around the world. A person sits at a table. Their real hand is hidden behind a screen. In front of them, in clear view, is a rubber hand placed in the same position. The experimenter strokes both the real hand and the rubber hand at the same time, with matching timing. Within a minute or two, something strange happens. The person begins to feel clearly that the rubber hand is theirs. If the experimenter then lightly threatens the rubber hand with a pin, the person flinches. This is called the rubber hand illusion, and it has been replicated countless times. What it shows is that the felt sense of the body, the feeling of where you end, is not fixed. It is assembled moment by moment from the agreement of your senses. When the senses agree that the rubber hand is yours, the brain obligingly includes it. This is only one example. There are many more. People who lose limbs often continue to feel them for years, sometimes vividly, phantom limbs, which can itch, ache, or move in ways the missing body part no longer can. The body map in the brain remains, even when the flesh does not. Closer to the ordinary, researchers have found that the brain constantly monitors signals from within the body, the heartbeat, the breath, the tiny fluctuations of the gut and muscles, and uses them to build your basic sense of being alive. This is called interoception, a word simply meaning inner sensing. A great deal of what you feel as being yourself comes from this quiet internal listening, which means the self you inhabit is not simply the physical body. It is a map of the body, woven in the brain, updated constantly by signals from outside and signals from within. Shift those signals, and the map shifts. Break them, and the map can fragment. This is where the theme of our slow journey deepens in a personal way. If the boundary of the body is drawn by the brain, then the edge between you and the world is not a solid wall, it is a moving agreement. You feel the blanket on your legs because your brain has decided the blanket is not you and the legs are. In a dream, that same decision-making running freely can attach you to any body, any place, any form. In an illusion, it can attach you to a piece of rubber. So on one side, there is a familiar intuition. You are in here, the world is out there. On the other side, there is a quieter observation. The in here and the out there are being separated by the mind, continually, like a hand drawing a line on sand that the waves are always softly redrawing. And if the dreamer's edge is negotiable, if even the sense of where you end is a construction, then the notion of being neatly separate from the rest of reality begins to loosen. Not dissolve, not disappear, just loosen, as if the dreamer and the dream might be, in some subtle, almost imperceptible way, closer than they seemed when we began. There is a pattern that has quietly puzzled anyone who studies dreams across cultures. People who have never met, who speak different languages, who grew up with different stories, often dream strikingly similar things. The dream of being chased, the dream of falling, the dream of finding an unknown room in your own house, the dream of teeth falling out, the dream of flying, the dream of arriving somewhere and realizing you have forgotten something essential. These images appear again and again, across continents, across centuries, with a persistence that is hard to fully explain. A thinker named Carl Jung in the early 20th century suggested that beneath each individual mind there might be a deeper layer, a kind of shared symbolic inheritance belonging to humanity itself. He called it the collective unconscious. It was not a telepathic network, it was something gentler, a suggestion that the architecture of the mind, shaped over an extraordinarily long evolutionary history, produced certain common themes because we are, underneath our differences, a single species dreaming together. Modern neuroscience has generally not adopted this idea in its original form. Many of the common themes in dreams can be explained, at least partly, by universal human experiences: the vulnerability of sleep, the evolutionary importance of faces, the basic fears of falling, of losing one's footing, of being pursued. The brain, facing these shared concerns across generations, may simply produce similar images as a result of similar circumstances, but within even the cautious scientific version, something quietly interesting remains. Across the billions of nightly dreams unfolding on this planet, there is a deep structural kinship. Humans everywhere dream in stories. Humans everywhere dream in symbols. Humans everywhere dream in emotions that translate, without much effort, across culture. The details differ. The underlying language, remarkably, does not. This is a gentle kind of wonder. It suggests that even in the most private, most hidden, most secret recesses of experience, the dreams you have alone in the dark, you are not truly alone. Somewhere in another time zone, someone is dreaming a variation of your dream. Somewhere in another century, someone already has. The images may differ. The feeling is familiar. If we hold this lightly without overreaching, it offers a small, warm thought that the dream of being human is not a solitary dream. It is, in some sense, a dream we take turns having, a shared, evolving story, vast in its scale, intimate in its texture, and this, in its own way, connects to the larger theme. If individual dreams can share such structural depth, then the sense of being a single, isolated dreamer in a private world may be another kind of soft illusion. You are, from one angle, a separate mind, living inside its own skull, weaving its own nightly dreams. From another angle, you are one flicker in a long, continuous, many-bodied dreaming, the human mind imagining itself across generations. Of course, this does not mean we are literally connected in some hidden network, nor does it reduce the uniqueness of each person's inner life. The mystery is gentler than that. It simply suggests, as mystic traditions and modern science sometimes agree, that what feels most personal may also be, at its deeper layers, most universal. The loneliness we sometimes feel at night, lying awake, is perhaps less complete than it seems. You are one dreamer, yes, but you are dreaming inside a species that has been dreaming for a very long time, and somewhere, softly, the dream remembers itself through you. There is a phenomenon reported in hospitals around the world that quietly unsettles doctors, nurses, and families who witness it. It is strange enough that, until recently, many clinicians hesitated to speak about it openly, and yet it happens, often enough, that it now has a name. It is sometimes called terminal lucidity, or the final clearing. A person who has been deeply unwell for months, sometimes years, whose mind seemed to have drifted beyond the reach of speech, suddenly, briefly returns. They recognize faces. They speak clearly. They say a last thing, or ask a last question, or simply look around with an unexpected calm. Then, within hours or days, they pass away. No one fully understands this. There are biological guesses, shifts in brain chemistry, last surges of neural activity, the body's final redistributions. None of these explain on their own the depth of awareness that sometimes returns, and no one is claiming any single explanation is correct. It is an active, open, deeply sensitive area of study. What is undeniable, however, is the human shape of these moments. People who have witnessed them describe something strangely reminiscent of waking up, as if a person, long drifting, briefly surfaces, a clearing, a small moment of recognition, then a gentle going. This is not a journey meant to speak lightly about the end of life. There is great tenderness required here. But within our slow exploration of the idea that reality may carry something dreamlike, these moments offer a small, quiet resonance. If the mind, at the very edge of leaving can briefly clarify, can step out of its long confusion into a short, bright awareness. It hints at something worth sitting with softly. Some thinkers have suggested that the experience of life itself might be, in some subtle way, a kind of immersion, an involved, detailed participation in a long unfolding, and that there are, within a lifetime, occasional moments where the immersion thins, near-death experiences, reported across cultures with strikingly similar elements, often describe a sense of increased clarity rather than reduced. People describe feeling more present, more lucid, more aware, even as the body fails. These reports are not proof of anything in particular. They are subjective, fragile, and deeply personal. But taken as human testimony, they form a gentle pattern. The body fades. The mind, for some reason, sometimes sharpens. One way to hold this, without reaching beyond what we can know, is to notice that these experiences resemble, in their shape, the moment inside a dream when the dreamer suddenly realizes they are dreaming. Not every dream contains such a moment. Most do not. But when it happens, there is a distinct texture to it, a sense of stepping backward into a wider awareness, a sense of recognizing the scene without breaking it, a sense of softness returning, whatever the final truth of such events. And there may be layers we will not understand for a long time. They offer a gentle possibility. That awareness, even in the softest and most vulnerable moments of a life, is not simply a product of a working body, that it can briefly rise, look around, and settle, that the dreamer is capable, at the edge, of noticing the dream. This is not a call to fear. It is, if anything, a small consolation. The mind, it seems, has more in it than we often realize. Even at the end, there are whispers of clarity. Even at the end, there are quiet signs of awakening. Every so often, life does something strange. You walk into a place you have never been, and something in you says, "I have been here before." You have a conversation, and suddenly every word feels already rehearsed, already heard, already known. You glance at a stranger's face, and for a second you feel certain you know them. These experiences pass quickly. They leave only a faint shimmer behind, and most of us, after a moment, shake them off and return to the ordinary flow. These small, curious ripples are sometimes called déjà vu, a phrase that simply means already seen. They are one of the most widely reported experiences in human psychology. Almost everyone has felt them at some point, and they are, in their own way, a soft tap on the shoulder of reality. Researchers have studied déjà vu carefully. The current leading explanations involve small glitches in memory processing. A new scene may briefly activate old neural patterns in ways that trick the brain into marking it as familiar, or there may be a delay between two paths of perception so that one signal arrives a fraction of a second before the other, and the brain, seeing the same thing twice at slightly different moments, reads it as memory. These explanations are useful. They are probably, at least in part, correct. But if you have ever felt a full, rich wave of déjà vu, one that lingered, one that seemed to open a door to something uncanny, you know that the simple explanations do not fully capture the feeling. There is a texture to it, a kind of widening of the ordinary, that statistics cannot easily name. There are other related experiences, synchronicities, where meaningful coincidences cluster in ways that seem, for a moment, improbable. Strange memories that do not quite match what can be verified, small mismatches between what we expect and what we find. These are often dismissed, reasonably, as the natural quirks of an imperfect perception system, and yet, taken together, they form a gentle pattern worth noticing. In a dream, the seams of the dream sometimes briefly show. You notice that the sign on a door has changed. You notice that a room has rearranged itself. You notice that a familiar face has softly become a stranger. These glitches do not shatter the dream. Usually you move on within it. But they are the places where, if you were paying closer attention, you might realize the dream is a dream. It is tempting to draw direct parallels between the glitches of the dream state and the glitches of waking life. But that temptation must be held with care. Déjà vu is not, by any known science, a sign that reality is a construction that has briefly slipped. It is most likely the brain's own processes producing a strange effect. What these experiences do offer, however, is a gentle reminder. Reality, even at its most ordinary, is not perfectly smooth. There are small, persistent oddities. There are shimmers at the edges. The world we inhabit is not a seamless machine. It is, at best, a mostly seamless performance, with occasional moments where the curtain briefly ripples. And perhaps this is not something to fear. Perhaps these ripples are a kindness. Little reminders that what you are walking through is more layered than it first appears. Little taps on the shoulder saying, softly, do not take all of this as given. There is more here than meets the eye. There is always more waiting beneath the surface of what seems ordinary. For thousands of years, across very different cultures, a small number of people have devoted enormous amounts of time to doing apparently nothing, sitting still, watching the breath, letting thoughts pass without grabbing them. From the outside, it can look strange, even unproductive. From the inside, as many practitioners describe, it becomes one of the most quietly radical things a human being can do. In the last few decades, scientists have begun to study what actually happens inside the brains and bodies of long-term meditators. What they have found is understated but remarkable. Over years of consistent practice, the patterns of brain activity begin to shift. Certain regions associated with self-referential thinking, the inner voice that narrates your life, the network that constructs the familiar sense of being a person with a past and a future, grow quieter during practice. Other regions, associated with sustained attention and calm, grow more active. The neurochemistry of stress tends to soften. The body's baseline state becomes gentler, but the more interesting changes are the ones that practitioners describe from the inside. In the earlier stages, meditation tends to feel like watching one's thoughts go by, like someone sitting on a riverbank, noticing what floats past. Thoughts come, thoughts go. The meditator tries, without straining, to return to the breath or to a simple focus whenever the mind wanders. This already has measurable benefits: a steadier mind, a less reactive heart, a body that sleeps more easily. As practice deepens, however, some describe a subtle change. The one sitting on the riverbank begins to feel less solid. The watcher, watched carefully enough, begins to dissolve. There are moments, sometimes very short, sometimes lasting longer, in which the sharp distinction between the one observing and the things being observed softens. Experience continues, awareness continues, but the center around which it was all organized, the familiar I, temporarily thins. Within contemplative traditions, this has many names: non-dual awareness, open awareness, a resting in what is. What the different traditions share is a shared direction, not away from the world, but into it. Not away from experience, but underneath it, to a layer that is quieter, more spacious, less bounded by the usual sense of self. Neuroscientists have cautiously described this as a softening of the default mode network, the same network we discussed earlier, which builds the familiar sense of me. When it quiets, the self loosens, the world does not vanish. It simply stops being arranged so tightly around a central viewer. If you have never practiced, this may sound abstract, but even ordinary moments can offer a small taste. When you are deeply absorbed in music, or lose yourself in a landscape, or watch a fire at night, the usual chatter of the inner voice sometimes briefly quiets. Something in you relaxes, something forgotten returns. These are small, accessible echoes of what meditators describe over much longer spans, and this is where the theme of our journey softly touches down. If practiced stillness can genuinely loosen the felt sense of self, then the dreamer who feels so separate, so isolated, so inside his or her own head is not as fixed as usually assumed. The dreamer can thin, and when the dreamer thins, something else, calmer, more spacious, harder to name, comes quietly into view. Awakening, in this gentle sense, is not a single event. It is a slow door that opens a little more each time you stop pushing on it. Not a destination, a slow, patient homecoming. Throughout human history, Almost every culture has discovered something strange about certain plants, mushrooms, and other natural substances. When consumed in careful, often ceremonial ways, they can temporarily and dramatically change how the mind experiences reality. The ordinary sense of being a person, living in a body, inside a world, can soften, stretch, or entirely reorganize. In recent years, this subject has re-entered serious scientific research. At major universities, carefully controlled studies have begun to explore what happens in the brain and in the subjective experience when people encounter these altered states under medical supervision. This section touches the topic gently, not as a recommendation, but as one more window into how flexible ordinary perception can be. What the research has found is striking. Certain substances appear to temporarily disrupt the default mode network, the same network that constructs the familiar sense of self. When that network quiets, people often report an experience called ego dissolution. The rigid sense of being a separate individual loosens. The boundary between the self and the world becomes porous. Some describe a feeling of profound unity. Others describe a temporary sense that everything is one unfolding process. These experiences are powerful, and they are not universally pleasant. Without proper context and support, they can be disorienting, even frightening. This is why contemporary researchers study them only in careful, clinical settings. The point here is not to glamorize such experiences, but to acknowledge what they reveal. They reveal that the sense of being a separate self is not anchored to the body in a permanent way. It is a pattern. When the pattern is disturbed, the self thins. When the self thins, something broader, quieter, harder to describe, seems to be present beneath it. Interestingly, the descriptions that people give of these peak experiences often resemble, with striking consistency, descriptions that mystics across many traditions have offered without any substances at all. A sense of unity, a feeling of being held within something larger, a perception that the ordinary self is a surface, and that underneath the surface there is something deeply alive, aware, and kind. This is not proof that these experiences reveal ultimate truth. They may be, at least in part, artifacts of the brain briefly rewiring itself. Skepticism is reasonable, so is caution. But what is remarkable is that human beings, throughout history, across wildly different cultures and methods, have found their way to very similar reports about what happens when the ordinary self is temporarily suspended. In the context of our slow journey, this matters for a reason that is hopefully becoming familiar. The dreamer is not fixed. The self we normally inhabit is one configuration, not the only one. There are other configurations. Some are gentle, some are dramatic. All of them, in different ways, hint that the everyday sense of being a separate person navigating a solid world is a particular setting of the mind, not a bedrock truth. And if reality, as seen through ordinary waking, is already a construction, then what happens when that construction loosens? What we find, apparently, is not chaos, not nothingness. We find something harder to name, but remarkably consistent in human reports. A sense of deep aliveness, of quiet meaning, of being part of something far larger than the individual story. None of this replaces the need for ordinary waking life. None of it denies the beauty of being a person, in a body, with a story. It simply suggests, softly, that the dream is wider than the dreamer usually imagines, and that the edges of the dream are not as firm as they seem. There is a moment, for anyone who has sat long enough with the deepest questions, when something unexpected happens. After enough reading, enough thinking, enough exploring, a certain kind of humility begins to settle. Not despair, not defeat, something softer, a quiet recognition that the deepest questions do not resolve. They deepen. This is perhaps the central lesson that both serious science and serious contemplation seem to arrive at. Each in their own way, physicists, asked what the universe is made of, increasingly answer with honesty that the question is harder than it once seemed. Biologists, asked what life fundamentally is, find themselves pointing at processes rather than fixed definitions. Neuroscientists, asked what consciousness is, admit that they do not know, and that the problem may require new ways of thinking we do not yet have. Philosophers, after centuries of careful work, have learnt to hold their best answers with gentle hands. And on the contemplative side, those who have spent decades in meditation often describe a similar arc. At first, practice seems to lead toward answers. Over time, it leads toward a relaxed relationship with questions. The urge to resolve begins to loosen. What remains is not confusion. It is a kind of friendly openness, the ability to sit with mystery without needing it to close. This can sound at first disappointing. If we cannot know for sure, then what have we been doing? Why explore? Why think? Why sit for years with these questions if they do not yield? But the experience most thinkers describe is the opposite of disappointment. The release of needing certainty is, in its own way, a kind of awakening to realize that the mind by its nature will never capture all of reality, that every framework describes a surface is not a failure. It is a kind of honesty, and from that honesty, something quieter and more beautiful can emerge, a relationship with reality that is not based on conquest but on attention, not on mastery but on wonder. This is also why this slow journey has, throughout, declined to insist on any single picture. The predictive brain, the informational universe, the holographic principle, the thought experiment of simulation, the constructed self, the flexible body, the shared symbolic mind, each of these is a useful angle. None of them is the full picture. They are, together, a gathering of careful hints, pointing at something that is larger than any of them alone. And that larger something is not a problem to be solved. It is the quiet, continuous aliveness of being here at all. On one side, there is the ancient urge to explain, to find the final answer, to hold reality in a hand small enough to carry. On the other side, there is an older, gentler intuition that the final answer, if there is one, is not the kind of thing that can be held. It is the kind of thing that can only be lived. This is the wisdom of not knowing, not a giving up, a giving over, a willingness to stay near the question without demanding the answer, a willingness to let reality exceed description without feeling threatened by the excess. And perhaps this is, in its soft way, what awakening has always been. Not a sudden flood of final truth, not a grand revelation that ends every question, just a gradual, trusting release of the need to fully understand. A light, calm resting in the mystery that was always here. That is here now. That is, very softly, the place we have been traveling toward all along. The word awakening has traveled through many centuries, picking up meanings as it went. In some traditions, it refers to a dramatic opening, a moment in which everything is suddenly seen clearly. In others, it refers to a slow, gradual softening, a lifelong ripening that never arrives at a single point. In still others, the word is treated with such reverence that it is barely spoken aloud. For our slow journey, it may help to hold the word more gently than any tradition usually does, to let it mean something simpler and perhaps more honest. Awakening, in the way we might think about it tonight, is not an escape. It is not a flight from ordinary life into a realm of pure truth. It is not a moment that makes the world disappear. If anything, it seems to work in the opposite direction. Those who have spent their lives exploring these questions through meditation, through art, through science, through quiet attention, often describe awakening not as leaving reality, but as finally arriving in it, as if they had been half here all along, and now they are more fully here. The room is the same room, the breath is the same breath, the life is the same life, but the quality of presence inside it is different, less defended, less abstracted, closer to the actual texture of what is. Neuroscience, for its part, gestures at something that may relate. Studies of deeply contemplative practitioners, of people in moments of profound calm, of people who have experienced certain transformative states, show that their brains are not strangely more active. They are in certain ways quieter. The parts that usually produce the relentless inner narration, the storyteller of the self, speak more softly. Experience, without that constant commentary, appears to open. It becomes more direct, more immediate, more here. This is an interesting clue. It suggests that what we call awakening might not be the adding of something new. It might be the subtracting of something that was in the way. The watcher loosens, the narrator quiets, and what was always present, awareness itself, simple and unadorned, comes gently forward. Of course, this is only one way to hold the word. There are deeper meanings, older meanings, more spiritual meanings that point at things beyond what any science can reach. Within many traditions, awakening is understood as a recognition of something far more profound than brain activity, a recognition of the fundamental nature of existence, or of a reality beneath reality, or of a relationship with a source that language cannot adequately describe. These meanings deserve respect and room. What they share across their differences is a gentle shape. Awakening does not push the world away, it draws it closer. It does not replace ordinary life with something rarer. It makes ordinary life visible as the extraordinary thing it quietly always was. And if this slow exploration has any purpose at all, it might be to soften the listener into this recognition, not by argument, not by insistence, just by drifting through enough angles, enough perspectives, enough reminders that something inside you relaxes. Because here is the quiet possibility at the heart of the idea. The awakening that so many have longed for across so many lives may not be far away. It may not require a special place, or a secret practice, or a long initiation. It may be in its most humble form, available right here, in the breath, in the bed, in the dark. In this very moment, there is a strange, almost recursive quality to what we have been doing throughout this slow exploration. A mind made of living cells, housed in a body, embedded in a universe, has been wondering what the mind is, what the body is, what the universe is. The observer has been observing itself. The dreamer has been dreaming about dreaming. Philosophers and mathematicians have long been fascinated by this kind of turning. They have given it different names: self-reference, recursion, strange loops. The thinker Douglas Hofstadter, in his explorations of consciousness and pattern, has suggested that the very thing we call a self might be, at its core, a strange loop, a pattern that refers back to itself, a system that includes a miniature model of itself, inside itself, aware of itself. Think of standing between two mirrors. Each mirror reflects the other. The reflections nest inside one another, deeper and deeper, tunneling away into a direction that is not forward and not back, but somehow inward. Something like that, perhaps, is happening whenever awareness turns to look at awareness. What is fascinating and gently moving is that the universe seems to have produced beings capable of doing this. A piece of the cosmos has folded back on itself and begun to ask what it is. Matter, arranged carefully enough, has begun to wonder about matter. The dream, at some scale, has started noticing the dream. This does not tell us everything. It does not solve the deep questions, but it does suggest something remarkable. Whatever reality is, it seems to allow this kind of turning. Whatever its ultimate nature, it has permitted a corner of itself to sit up, look around, and consider the whole. Some thinkers have quietly proposed that this self-reference is not a rare side effect. It might be, in some way, central to what existence is. A universe that never folded back on itself would have no knowers inside it, no questioners, no moments of wonder. Whatever the origin of this folding, it has given rise to something that language barely captures, a dream that has begun to have an inkling of being a dream. This is, in a way, the deepest shape of our theme. Waking up, in the sense hinted at by so many traditions, may not be escaping the dream at all. It may be the dream becoming softly aware of itself from the inside, the turning, the loop closing, the recognition, and something gentle sits within this recognition. If you are doing this at all, if some part of you is capable of reading these words and wondering, even for a moment, what reality really is, then you are participating in one of the most astonishing acts the universe has produced. You are a place where the whole is curious about the whole. You are a small mirror facing a vast mirror, and the reflections go, quietly, forever. This is not a burden. It is not a task. It is a strange, soft privilege to be a loop, to be a pattern that notices patterns, to be a dream that has begun to catch the faintest scent of its own dreaming. Tonight, you do not have to resolve any of it. You do not have to arrive at any truth. It is enough, perhaps, to lie here and notice, without urgency, that the universe, through you, is quietly turning toward itself, looking, listening, drifting gently toward a warmth it cannot quite name. There is a small fear that sometimes arises when people first sit with the idea that reality is more dreamlike than it seems. A fear that if the world is not what it appears to be, then perhaps nothing matters, that if perception is constructed, meaning must be constructed too and therefore empty, that if the self is a story, then life itself becomes a story of nothing. This fear is understandable. It is also, on closer inspection, not quite earned. Consider how meaning actually works in a life. When you think of the moments that feel most meaningful to you, they are not usually moments where you solve the ultimate questions of existence. They are often quite small: a conversation with someone you love, a walk under a sky after rain, a song that caught you at exactly the right time, a piece of understanding that clicked softly into place. These moments do not require a finished theory of reality to be meaningful. They simply are meaningful in a way that arrives directly, without needing permission. Psychologists who study how humans create meaning have noticed something interesting. Meaning does not depend on certainty. It depends on attention, on relationship, on engagement. People who live inside great uncertainties, scientists exploring unknowns, artists navigating difficult material, caregivers sitting with illness, often describe their lives as deeply meaningful, not in spite of the uncertainty, but because of their participation inside it. Meaning seems to grow from contact, not from conclusions. There is a related finding from research on what is sometimes called flow. When a person becomes absorbed in a task or experience that matches their capacity, time softens, the sense of self quiets, and a kind of satisfaction arrives that is very hard to manufacture deliberately. Flow does not require solved mysteries. It requires presence, participation, willingness to be here, doing this, now, which means that accepting a more mysterious view of reality does not rob life of meaning. It may in fact do the opposite. When you stop demanding that the world be a solved problem, you become free to be in it more fully. When you stop insisting that every question have a finished answer, you can enjoy the questions themselves as companions rather than obstacles. There is also something quietly kind about admitting that you are living inside a mystery. It excuses the need for certainty. It softens the grip on being right. It allows for the possibility that others, holding very different pictures, may also be touching something real. On one hand, many traditions have spoken of the universe as a place of deep intentionality, of care, of meaning woven into its very structure. On the other hand, modern science has been cautious about such claims, preferring to describe rather than to declare. These two ways of engaging with the world do not need to be enemies. They can, in their own ways, inform each other. Science offers careful maps. Tradition offers long practice. Both are gestures toward the same mystery from different angles. And here, tonight, you do not have to choose between them. You can let them coexist. You can let yourself be someone who takes the discoveries of modern science seriously, and who also takes seriously the ancient human sense that existence is not random, that being here matters, that something gentle hums beneath the noise. Meaning does not require a finished universe. Meaning only requires that you be present inside whatever this is. And you are. You always have been. Awakening, as language has come to use it, often sounds like a large event, a grand opening, a sudden, luminous shift. And while some have described their experiences in such dramatic terms, the truth for most people, most of the time, is quieter, more ordinary, more woven into daily life than we usually notice. If you have ever, for a few seconds, stood still and felt the sunlight on your face and, without thinking, felt simply glad to be alive, that was a small awakening. If you have ever held a cup of something warm and felt, for a moment, that the weight of it in your hands was oddly precious, that was a small awakening. If you have ever walked into a room and seen the light fall on an object in a way you had seen 1,000 times before, and yet this time something about it seemed almost shining, that was a small awakening. These small moments are ordinary in one sense and extraordinary in another. They are the texture of being truly present. They are what happens when the usual flow of thinking pauses, and the world which has been here all along becomes briefly available to you in a more direct way. Researchers who study attention have shown that much of our daily experience is lived in a kind of mental absence. The body goes through the motions. The inner voice narrates its endless commentary. Time passes without being lived. Studies suggest that a significant portion of waking hours, for many people, is spent not here, but in a simulation of here, thinking about what happened, what might happen, what should have happened, what someone said, what we will say tomorrow. This is not a failure. It is just what minds do. But it means that most of the actual moments of a life are, in a sense, lightly missed. The sunlight was there, we did not see it. The food was there, we did not taste it. The conversation was there, we were halfway elsewhere. And this is why small awakenings matter. They are, in their gentle way, corrections. Moments when awareness briefly returns to where the body actually is. Moments when the dreamer notices, softly, that the dream is happening. None of this requires belief in any particular philosophy. It does not require a practice, a tradition, or a framework. It only requires the willingness to, occasionally, pause and be here, not for long, not perfectly, just for a breath, just for the length of a heartbeat. The old traditions have spoken about this in many ways. They call it presence, they call it mindfulness, they call it remembrance, they call it being awake. Whatever the name, the essence is the same. Every moment offers a small doorway. You do not have to walk through all of them. You only have to walk through some of them. Over a life, this begins to add up. The small awakenings, gathered gently, become a kind of habit. Not a discipline in the harsh sense, a softness, a way of turning toward the moment more often than away from it. A way of being, slowly, more willing to notice. And perhaps this is what awakening ultimately is for most human beings. Not a single blinding arrival, a quiet accumulation of small returns, a life stitched together by many brief rememberings, an ordinary existence, gently, becoming slightly more luminous each day, until the ordinary itself begins to shine. The body, every night, does something strange. It lays itself down. It surrenders its weight to whatever surface holds it. It slows the breath. It softens the muscles. It allows the mind, which has been working all day, to begin to let go. This is not a small thing. It is one of the most ancient rituals any creature performs. Every mammal sleeps. Every bird finds somewhere safe to close its eyes. Even some simpler creatures have rest states that act like sleep. The universe, in its evolutionary creativity, has invented rest again and again in countless forms, across countless species. To sleep is to be part of an enormous silent tradition older than any human culture. The biology of this is gentle and intricate. Inside your body there is a clock, not ticking in one place but distributed across almost every cell. This clock, the circadian rhythm, tunes you to the turning of the planet. When the sun rises, certain chemicals flow. When the light fades, others begin to build. The substance melatonin, for example, slowly increases in your body as evening comes, helping to prepare you for rest. Your temperature dips, your heart slows a little. Your body begins, softly, to turn inward. These are not decisions you have to make. They happen to you. They happen for you. The body knows how to do this. It has known for longer than you have been alive. And this, in a quiet way, is the same shape as what many traditions call awakening. Not a push, not a grasping, a release, a willingness to let something older, something wiser, something more patient than the striving mind, take over for a while. There is a kind of trust in falling asleep each night that is worth noticing. To let go of consciousness, to allow the world to continue without your watching, to trust that you will return to it in the morning. is a small daily act of faith. We rarely think of it this way, but it is one of the most intimate trusts a body performs. Awakening, in the deeper sense, may be similar. Not something you chase, not something you earn, something you allow. A gentle releasing of the habit of holding, a willingness to stop defending the edges of the self so tightly, and let the larger reality, whatever it is, support you the way the bed supports you now. Contemplative teachers, across traditions, often describe the state they point toward as a kind of waking sleep, awareness without the usual grip, presence without the usual effort, the body alert, the mind at rest. A person simply here. This is the gentle horizon toward which our slow journey has been drifting. Not a dramatic arrival, a gradual settling, a softening of what can be softened, a noticing of what is already here. And here, at the edge of this chapter, you may feel the same softening beginning in the body, the shoulders, the jaw, the breath. These things have been waiting all along for permission to let go. You do not need to do it forcefully, just allow it. Just let the body begin what it has always known how to begin. Awakening may be closer to this than to any grand event, closer to the way the body sinks into a bed, closer to the way the breath slows when the day is done, closer to the quiet, ancient act of trusting the dark, knowing that, whatever happens, morning has always, faithfully returned. Somewhere in the quiet of this long walk, a number of threads have gathered without needing to be tied. They are still loose. They are meant to be loose. But perhaps for a moment, it is worth noticing that they rest beside each other, softly, in the same warm room. One thread was the quiet suggestion that perception is built rather than received, that the colors and sounds and textures of the world are assembled inside the dark cave of the skull from faint electrical whispers, that the brain paints the world with such skill that the painting feels like the world itself. Another thread was the strangeness of the smallest things, particles that seem to wait before settling, fields that shimmer rather than sit still, a deep layer of reality that refuses to be fully solid, that behaves more like a possibility than a thing, a universe that, the closer we look, seems less like a fixed object and more like an unfolding. Another was the softness of the self. The watcher behind the eyes, once examined, dissolves into a network of patterns, a story being told moment by moment, a whirlpool in a stream, memory, rebuilt each time it is recalled, a body whose edges are drawn by the brain, a mind that shares deep symbols with every other mind without needing to meet them. And running through all of these, like a single quiet note, was the idea that these layers, perception, physics, self, resemble, in their texture, the shape of a dream, not because reality is unreal, but because the kind of reality we live in is more participatory, more painted, more woven than we once allowed ourselves to imagine. None of these threads have given final answers. They were never meant to. Final answers may not be the kind of thing this topic offers. What they have given instead is something gentler, a shift in relationship, a feeling of living inside something more layered, more open, more alive than the ordinary day lets us notice. If anything has been suggested here, it is perhaps only this, that the ordinary experience of being you, here, now, in this moment, is quietly extraordinary, that the walls of reality are not as hard as they seem, that the dream, if dream it is the kind of dream one can learn to feel fondly. You do not have to resolve any of this tonight. You do not have to commit to any one picture. You can let the threads rest beside each other, like friends who no longer need to explain themselves, each one pointing, in its own way, toward the same soft horizon, each one saying, in its own small voice, that what you are and what contains you is more gentle, more mysterious, more spacious than you usually have the time to feel. And that is enough, for now, for this breath, for this quiet hour of listening. There is a particular kind of comfort that arrives, not when a problem is solved, but when a problem is set down, when you realize gently that some questions were never yours to finish, that their purpose was not to be answered, but to be lived inside of. Sleep is, in its own way, a nightly practice in this very art. All day long, the mind is busy solving, finishing, closing, completing. There are lists, there are deadlines, there are thoughts that insist on being turned over again and again until they resolve, and then, at some point, the body begins to tire, the evening begins to fall, and something inside you begins, quietly, to loosen its grip on all the things that did not, today, reach an ending. This is not a failure. It is the natural shape of a human life. Every day is left a little unfinished. Every conversation ends somewhere in the middle of a longer story. Every question we did not quite answer sits down beside us, patient, waiting to be picked up again tomorrow, or the next day, or never. Falling asleep is the body's way of practicing what the deep traditions have long recommended for the soul, letting go of the need to finish, letting the unresolved be unresolved, trusting that the world will still be here in the morning, and that some of its mysteries are meant to remain mysteries for a while longer. The great questions we have walked through tonight are, in their own way, part of this. Whether reality is a dream, whether the self is a story, whether the universe hums with meaning. These questions are not unfriendly. They are not threats. They do not need to be solved for you to lie here, safe, breathing, alive. They are more like stars. They shine at a distance. They give a little light to the path. They do not require you to reach them. There is a quiet kindness in realizing this, a softening of the mind that has been trying, perhaps for a long time, to nail things down, a permission, finally, to rest inside what you do not know. And in that rest, something curious often happens. The questions, no longer demanding answers, become companions. They walk beside you instead of ahead of you. They wait, gently, for whatever comes next. They allow you to be here, in this breath, in this body, in this warm, familiar dark, without needing to understand everything at once. You are allowed not to know. You are allowed to hold your wonder without solving it. You are allowed to leave the universe slightly unfinished tonight, and to trust that it can carry its own questions for a while without your help. If you were to step outside very late on a night with little moon and little cloud and look up, the sky would be quietly full of stars, not the few bright ones of a city night. More, many more. A slow dusting of ancient light spread across a darkness older than any human memory. Each of those small points is a star, sometimes a galaxy, sometimes something even further. The light from some of them has been traveling toward you for thousands of years, for tens of thousands, for millions. It began its journey when forests were different, when continents were arranged differently, when the very idea of a human being had not yet arrived, and it has been falling quietly the whole time, aimed at this night, at this sky, at your eyes, lying in this bed. You do not need to step outside. You can close your eyes and feel it from here, above the roof, beyond the ceiling, past the thin film of atmosphere. That vast, patient darkness continues. It has always been there. It will be there tomorrow. It has not been watching you. It has not been ignoring you. It has simply been in the way that old, quiet things are. And inside you, something equally old is happening. The breath rises and falls. The heart presses its slow, steady rhythm through the chest. The body, without being asked, is quietly doing everything it needs to do to keep you alive. Cells are replacing themselves. Nerves are humming softly. The small, gentle machinery of being a person is running, as it has been running for every minute of every year of your life, without asking for thanks. You are held, right now, by two vast presences. One is the wide, starred darkness outside, reaching into distances no mind can fully picture. The other is the quiet, intelligent aliveness of your own body, reaching into depths no mind can fully inspect. You are between them. You are of them. You are not separate from either. Let the shoulders lower. Let the jaw soften. Let the face become loose and warm. Notice, if you can, the weight of the body against whatever is holding it. Notice, if you can, the slow, unbothered rhythm of the breath. Above, the stars. Beneath, the bed. And between them, you. breathing softly, without having to do anything more than this, without having to understand anything more than this. The long journey of this evening has not asked you to solve a single thing. It has only asked you to drift, to wonder, to be willing to be here, inside your life, inside your breath, inside your quiet body, while something larger, softer, and older holds you without your having to notice how, whatever reality is, it is safe for you to rest inside it. Whatever the deeper nature of this world, whether it is a construction of the brain, a pattern of information, a fold within something far vaster than we can measure, it has, all along, held you. It has held you as a child. It has held you through days you do not remember. It has held you through nights you thought you could not get through. It is holding you now. You do not need to understand it to be carried by it. The breath rises. The breath falls. There is no hurry. There is no need. If your thoughts wander, let them wander. If they return, let them return. If they soften into small, strange images that no longer quite make sense, that is only the mind beginning its nightly drift. That is only the edge of the dream coming closer. You are allowed to let go now. Whatever was not finished today, it will still be there tomorrow, and the world will be gentle with it. Whatever questions we touched tonight, they will still be here, patient, when you wake. They are not going anywhere. They do not need your worry. They are old and kind, and they know how to wait. You are allowed to let go now. If reality is a dream, it is a dream that has always loved you quietly. If reality is something else, something we do not yet have words for, that something has always loved you quietly too. Whatever it is, it does not need your certainty. It only invites your rest. The bed is holding you. The night is holding the bed. The earth is holding the night. And something larger than the earth, older than the stars, softer than any explanation, is holding all of it. You are allowed to let go now. Feel the warmth where the body meets the covers. Feel the slow, steady softness of the breath leaving the chest. Let the mind, which has worked so hard, begin to trust that it can set its work down for a little while. You do not have to wake up fully tonight. That is not what this has been about. The deeper awakening, if it comes gently, over many quiet nights, over many ordinary mornings, over many soft returns. Tonight you only have to rest. Tonight you only have to drift. Tonight you only have to let the long, patient dream of existence carry you, as it has always carried you, towards sleep. Let the next breath be a little slower. Let the next thought be a little quieter. Let the edges of you soften into the edges of the night. Good rest, and, whenever the time is right, a very gentle, very kind good morning, waiting for you on the other side of the dark,